The sledgehammer connected with the concrete, with a thunderous crack that echoed through the suburban morning. Karen's shriek pierced the air as she watched 20 years of her carefully orchestrated neighborhood control crumble in real time. She had the police on speed dial, the city inspector in her pocket, and every HOA regulation memorized by heart. But as the officers approached her doorstep with barely contained laughter, Karen realized she had made one fatal miscalculation, had declared war on a man who had nothing left to lose, and everything she thought she knew about property Marcus Chen stood in his backyard at 6:30 in the morning, coffee mug in hand, watching the sunrise paint the chlorinated water of his pool in shades of gold and amber. For the first time in months, something approaching peace settled over his shoulders like a familiar blanket. The house behind him was quiet Sierra, and the kids wouldn't be up for another hour. And the neighborhood was still wrapped in that precious silence that existed only in the space between night and day. He should have known it wouldn't last. The sharp rap of knuckles against his back gate shattered the moment like glass. Marcus didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Only one person in the entire subdivision had the audacity to show up at someone's property before 7 a.m. wearing righteousness like armor. Marcus Chen. The voice carried the particular pitch of authority that came from years of wielding homeowner association bylaws like a weapon. "I need to speak with you immediately." Marcus took a long sip of his coffee, savoring the bitter warmth before turning to face Karen Whitmore. She stood at his gate like a general surveying a battlefield. Clipboard clutched against her chest, her silver hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch the skin around her eyes. At 62, Karen had perfected the art of looking perpetually. Offended by the mere existence of other people. "Morning, Karen." Marcus kept his voice level, though every muscle in his body had gone tense. "Little early for a social call, don't you think?" "This is not a social call." Karen's eyes swept over his backyard with the calculating precision of a hawk spotting prey. "This is official HOA business. I've received multiple complaints about your pool." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Complaints about what? The obvious safety violations, for starters. Karen pulled a pen from behind her ear and made a notation on her clipboard. No safety fence around the perimeter. The diving board appears to be installed without proper permits, and the pool lights, she gestured dramatically toward the underwater fixtures. Those aren't the approved LED models specified in Section 12 of the Community Guidelines. Marcus set his coffee mug down on the pool deck with deliberate care. "We've been through this. I've lived here for 8 years. The pool was installed by the previous owners 20 years ago. Everything was grandfathered in when the new HOA regulations passed. Grandfathered status can be revoked if a property owner makes substantial modifications." Karen's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "And replacing your pool pump last month constitutes a substantial modification." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I replaced a broken pump. It's the same model, same specifications, different serial number." Karen made another note. "Which means it's technically a new installation, which means it needs to comply with current standards." She looked up from her clipboard, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that made his blood run cold. It wasn't just bureaucratic satisfaction, it was personal vindication. "You have 30 days to bring the pool into compliance, or face a lien against your property." Marcus stared at her, processing the implications. Bringing the pool into compliance would cost him $15,000. Minimum. Money he didn't have, not with Sarah's medical bills eating through their savings like acid. Money that might as well be $15 million given their current financial situation. "You can't be serious." "I'm deadly serious." Karen's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than a shout. "I've been watching you, Marcus. Watching how you think the rules don't apply to you. How you park your car 2 inches over the property line. How you let your grass grow 3.5 inches when the maximum allowed height is 3 inches. How you installed that outdoor kitchen without submitting the proper architectural review forms. The outdoor kitchen is a portable gas grill with a permanent propane connection." Karen tapped her pen against the clipboard. "Permanent installations require approval." "You know what your problem is, Marcus? You think because you're some hotshot architect with your fancy downtown firm, you can just do whatever you want. Well, this is my neighborhood, and in my neighborhood, everyone follows the rules." Marcus felt the familiar weight of exhaustion settle over him, the same bone-deep weariness that had been his constant companion since Sarah's diagnosis. Every conversation became a battle. Every day brought new challenges, new expenses, new ways for the universe to remind him that control was an illusion. And now, Karen Whitmore, who had appointed herself the unofficial dictator of Maple Grove Estates, wanted to take away the one thing that still brought his family joy. "Karen, please." He hated the pleading note that crept into his voice, but desperation made diplomacy irrelevant. "My wife is sick. We're dealing with cancer treatments and the medical bills. I'm sorry to hear about Sarah's condition." Expression didn't soften even slightly. But personal hardships don't excuse violations of community standards. The rules exist for a reason, Marcus. Property values, neighborhood aesthetics, safety concerns. This is about the property line dispute, isn't it? The question hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Karen's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but it was enough. Marcus had hit the target. 6 months ago, Marcus had commissioned a professional survey of his property after noticing that Karen's elaborate garden shed seemed to encroach on his land. The survey had revealed what he suspected: 3 feet of Karen's precious herb garden was actually on his property. 3 feet that she had been maintaining, improving, and claiming as her own for over a decade. Marcus had approached her diplomatically, survey in hand, expecting a reasonable conversation about adjusting the boundary markers. Instead, Karen had accused him of harassment, claimed the survey was fraudulent, and launched a campaign of retribution. "This has nothing to do with your ridiculous property claims," Karen said, but her voice had taken on a defensive edge. "This is about maintaining community standards and ensuring that every resident cut the bullshit." "Karen," the words came, out harder than Marcus intended, sharpened by months of accumulated frustration. "You've been looking for a way to get back at me ever since that survey proved your garden shed is on my land. This pool inspection is harassment, pure and simple." Karen's face flushed red. "How dare you accuse me of what? Abusing your position as HOA president to pursue personal vendettas, of using community bylaws as weapons against neighbors you don't like." Marcus stepped closer to the gate, and Karen instinctively stepped back. "Because that's exactly what you're doing. I am protecting this neighborhood." Karen's voice rose to a near shout. "From people like you who think they can just do whatever they want without consequences. People like me." Marcus felt something dangerous unfurling in his chest. "What exactly does that mean, Karen?" For a moment, Karen's mask slipped completely. Her eyes flicked toward the house, taking in the architectural details that marked it as different from the cookie-cutter McMansions that dominated the subdivision. Taking in Marcus himself, his dark hair, his features that spoke of heritage, from somewhere beyond the narrow confines of their predominantly white neighborhood. "People who don't understand how things work around here," she said finally. But the damage was done. The subtext hung between them like smoke. Marcus nodded slowly. "There it is, the real reason. Don't you dare try to make this about what? About the fact that you've been trying to drive me out of this neighborhood since the day I moved in? About how you accidentally excluded my family from the neighborhood barbecue 3 years running? About how you called the police when my nephew was visiting because a young black man in the neighborhood seemed suspicious to you?" Karen's face had gone pale except for 2 spots of red high on her cheeks. "That's not Ty, never said. You didn't have to say it. Your actions spoke loud enough." Marcus gripped the gate between them, his knuckles white. "But you made one mistake, Karen. You picked the wrong fight at the wrong time with the wrong person." "Is that a threat?" "It's a promise." Marcus's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "You want to play games with regulations and bylaws? Fine. But understand something, I'm an architect. I know building codes better than you know your own name. I know property law, zoning ordinances, and municipal regulations, and I have nothing left to lose." Karen clutched her clipboard tighter. 30 days, Marcus. Bring that pool into compliance, or face the consequences." She turned and stalked away, her sensible shoes clicking against the concrete with military precision. Marcus watched her go, noting how she paused at the corner of his property line to examine his fence posts, looking for new violations to catalog. By noon, Marcus had made 17 phone calls, sent 23 emails, and submitted 4 formal complaints to various city departments. He sat in his home office, surrounded by property surveys, building permits, and municipal codebooks that he'd downloaded and printed, creating a paper fortress of regulations and legal precedents. Sarah appeared in the doorway with a sandwich and a worried expression. The chemotherapy had left her thin and pale, but her eyes still held the sharp intelligence that had made her one of the city's most respected high school principals before the cancer forced her early retirement. "You've been in here for 4 hours," she said, setting the plate down next to his keyboard. "Are you going to tell me what's really going on, or do I have to call Karen myself and ask?" Marcus looked up from the screen where he'd been cross-referencing HOA bylaws with state property law. "You're not calling Karen anything, and you're definitely not going anywhere near that woman." Marcus Sarah settled into the chair across from his desk, the one she used when they needed to have serious conversations. "I've been married to you for 12 years. I know the difference between your working on a project face and your planning someone's destruction face. This is definitely the second one." Despite everything, Marcus felt his mouth twitch toward a smile. She threatened to put a lien on our house if I don't spend $15,000 upgrading a pool that was built to code 20 years ago because you replaced the pump. Because she's trying to force us out of the neighborhood, and she thinks we're too vulnerable to fight back. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying his wife's face. She's not wrong about the vulnerable part, but she made a serious miscalculation about the fighting back part. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently touching the silk scarf she wore to cover her head. "What did you find? You remember when we moved in, and the previous owners mentioned that Karen had been trying to buy this house for years. They said she made offers above asking price multiple times, right? And you remember how she always seemed to know exactly when our lawn was getting a little long, or when we forgot to bring the trash cans in by noon on collection day." Sarah nodded. "It was like she was watching us. She was watching us. Because this house," Marcus gestured toward the window that looked out over their backyard, "has a direct view of her property line dispute. The 3 feet of our land that she's been using for her garden, it's visible from our pool deck, our kitchen window, and our master bedroom." "I'm not following." Marcus turned his computer screen toward her. On the display was an aerial photograph of their neighborhood with property lines clearly marked in bright yellow. "Karen has been illegally occupying our land for over a decade. She's made substantial improvements to that section, planted expensive herbs, installed irrigation, built raised garden beds. Under adverse possession laws, she could potentially claim ownership of that land if she can prove continuous, uninterrupted use, could potentially, the key word is uninterrupted, if we can prove that she knew the land wasn't hers, or if we formally object to her use of the property, the adverse possession clock resets." Marcus clicked to another document. "Which is why she's been trying to drive us out. The previous owners were elderly and never paid attention to the property lines. But we commissioned a survey." Sarah leaned forward, understanding dawning in her eyes. "She needs us gone before we can establish our legal claim to the land." "Exactly, and the pool gives her the perfect weapon. It's the most expensive thing to bring into compliance with current regulations. She probably figured we'd default on the fees, go into foreclosure, and she could buy the house through a proxy. But she didn't count on you being an architect who actually knows the building codes." Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a particularly nice expression. She really didn't, because here's what I found in my 17 phone calls today. He pulled up a new document. Karen's own property has 14 separate code violations. Her garden shed is too close to the property line. Her deck doesn't have proper railings. Her driveway expansion was never permitted. And her septic system hasn't been inspected in 6 years, which is a mandatory requirement in this county. Sarah stared at the screen. How did she get away with all of this? Same way she got away with harassing us. She's been cozy with the city inspector for years. Probably figured no one would ever challenge her. Marcus's fingers drummed against the desk. But I also called the state HOA oversight board. Turns out, using your position as HOA president to target specific residents for personal reasons is considered abuse of authority. It can result in removal from the board and personal liability for any damages. Marcus, what are you planning? Before he could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Davidson and Associates, the surveying company. Marcus answered on the second ring. "Mr. Chen, This is Tom Davidson. I got your message about conducting an expanded property survey. That's right. I need a comprehensive boundary assessment, including any encroachments or unauthorized improvements on my property. We can definitely do that. But I have to tell you, after your call this morning, I did some research on the neighborhood. Your property line dispute isn't the only one we've surveyed in Maple Grove Estates in the past few years. Marcus felt a chill of anticipation. Karen Whitmore has been involved in property disputes with 6 different neighbors over the past 4 years. Each time, she's claimed that surveys were inaccurate or that she had grandfather rights to use portions of adjacent properties. In 3 cases, the neighbors eventually sold their houses rather than fight it out in court. Are you saying she's done this before? I'm saying she's done exactly this before, always targeting new residents, always using her HOA position to create expensive compliance issues, always timing her attacks when families are dealing with financial stress. Davidson's voice carried a note of disgust. Mr. Chen, I've been doing this for 25 years, and I've never seen a more systematic pattern of neighbor harassment. Marcus looked at Sarah, who was watching his face intently. Tom, I need that survey done as quickly as possible, and I need you to document everything, every encroachment, every unauthorized improvement, every inch of my property that's being illegally occupied. Consider it done. I can have a crew out there tomorrow morning, and, Mr. Chen, I'll be personally overseeing the survey. It's about time someone stood up to that woman. After hanging up, Marcus found Sarah staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. She's done this to other families, Sarah said quietly, forced them out of their homes. 3 families that we know of, probably more. Marcus felt anger building in his chest, hot and righteous, all while pretending to protect neighborhood standards and property values. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and determined. What do you need? Me to do, Sarah. You're dealing with cancer treatments. You don't need to. Don't. She held up a hand. Don't you dare try to protect me from this fight. That woman tried to use my illness as leverage against our family. She thought being sick made me weak. Sarah's eyes hardened. Marcus had fallen in love with Sarah's fierce intelligence years ago, but he'd never loved her more than he did in that moment. The city inspector who's been covering for Karen, his name is Dale Morrison. I need to find out exactly how cozy their relationship is. I'll handle that. I still have contacts in the school system, and Dale's wife works in the district office. Sarah stood up, moving with more energy than Marcus had seen from her in weeks. What else? I need to contact the other families, Karen forced out. If we can prove a pattern of harassment and abuse of authority, we can not only get her removed from the HOA board, we can potentially sue for damages. And the pool. Marcus glanced toward the window, where he could see the afternoon sun glinting off the water. The pool stays exactly where it is, but I'm going to make some modifications that Karen isn't going to like, such as, well, according to Municipal Code Section 15.7, any property owner has the right to install security measures to protect their property from encroachment or unauthorized access. Marcus pulled up another document on his screen. Security cameras, motion sensors, property line markers, even fencing, all completely legal and exempt from HOA approval as long as they're within 5 feet of the actual property line. Sarah studied the survey map. Our actual property line runs right through the middle of Karen's herb garden. Right through the middle, which means I can install a security fence along the true property line. Sensors, to protect our land from further unauthorized use. Marcus clicked through to a website for a fencing company. I can have it done by the end of the week. She's going to lose her mind. That's the idea. Because when she comes screaming about property destruction and trespassing, she's going to have to explain to the police why she's been illegally occupying our land for over a decade. Marcus leaned back in his chair, feeling something like satisfaction for the first time in months. And when she tries to cite HOA regulations, she's going to discover that her own property violations are about to cost her a lot more than $15,000. Sarah moved to the The sound of heavy machinery at 7 a.m. on Thursday morning shattered the suburban tranquility of Maple Grove Estates like a sledgehammer through glass. Marcus stood on his back deck, coffee in hand, watching the surveying crew stake out his property lines with military precision. Tom Davidson supervised from the center of what had been Karen's herb garden. his bright orange vest a beacon of authority amid the measuring equipment and boundary markers. "Mr. Chen." The crew chief waved him over. "We've got the northern boundary mapped. You want to see this?" Marcus walked across his yard, noting with satisfaction that each step took him deeper into what Karen considered her territory. The crew had worked since dawn, using GPS equipment to establish the exact legal boundaries of his property. What they'd found was even better than Marcus had hoped. "She's been using a lot more of your land than you thought," Davidson said, pointing to a series of orange flags that stretched in a line from the back fence to the side yard. "The garden is just the beginning. Her storage shed, her compost bins, her decorative rock borderites all on your property. We're talking about roughly 400 square feet of unauthorized occupation. 400 square feet. Marcus felt a grim smile spread across his face. "What's the current market value of that much land in this neighborhood?" "Conservatively, about $12,000. But given the improvements she's made without your permission and the length of time she's been trespassing, you could probably sue for 3 times that amount." Marcus was about to respond when the back gate to Karen's yard slammed open with enough force to rattle the hinges. Karen Whitmore stormed across what she thought was her property, wearing a bathrobe in fury in equal measure, her silver hair wild from sleep. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" she shrieked, waving a cordless phone like a weapon. "I've already called the police. This is destruction of private property." Davidson stepped forward calmly. "Ma'am, I'm Tom Davidson from Davidson & Associates Surveying. We're conducting a legal property boundary assessment at the request of the property owner." He gestured toward Marcus. "Mr. Chen has every right to determine the exact boundaries of his land. This is my garden. I've been maintaining this space for 12 years. Actually, ma'am, you've been trespassing on Mr. Chen's property for 12 years. Davidson's voice remained professionally neutral, but Marcus caught the hint of satisfaction underneath. These orange flags marked the legal property line as recorded in the county assessor's office. Karen's face went through several shades of red before settling on a color that reminded Marcus of arterial bleeding. "That's impossible. The property line runs along the fence. The fence was installed incorrectly by the previous owner of Mr. Chen's property approximately 15 years ago. The actual boundary line is here." Davidson pointed to the orange flags that cut directly through Karen's prize-winning herb garden, bisecting her carefully cultivated rows of basil, rosemary, and thyme. For a moment, Karen was speechless. Marcus watched her mental calculations, saw the exact moment when she realized the implications of what she was seeing. 12 years of improvements, 12 years of acting as the legal owner, 12 years of what could now be proven as knowing trespass. "This survey is fraudulent," she said finally, her voice shaking with rage. "I'm calling my lawyer." "You should definitely do that," Marcus said, speaking for the first time, "because in about 4 hours, a fencing crew is going to arrive to install a security fence along the actual property line. According to municipal code, I don't need anyone's permission to fence my own property." Karen's eyes widened as the full scope of his plan became clear. "You can't. The HOA bylaws prohibit new fencing without architectural review." "The HOA bylaws don't supersede property rights," Davidson interjected. "Mr. Chen has every legal right to fence his property to prevent further unauthorized use. Furthermore," Marcus continued, "I'll be installing security cameras to document any future trespassing attempts. The motion sensors will be quite sensitive. They'll detect anyone who comes within 5 feet of the fence line." Karen's phone rang, and she answered it without taking her eyes off Marcus. "Hello, yes, this is Karen Whitmore, and I need officers at 1247 Maple Grove Drive immediately. There are men destroying my property with heavy equipment." Marcus pulled out his own phone and held up the screen so Karen could see it. The display showed a contact labeled Channel 7 News, Jeff Morrison. "Funny thing about calling the police," Marcus said conversationally. "My friend Jeff at the Herald mentioned that his editor is always looking for good follow-up stories, especially ones with dramatic visuals. I bet footage of police responding to a property dispute would make excellent B-roll." For Sunday's article about HOA abuse in suburban neighborhoods, Karen's conversation with the emergency dispatcher faltered. "What article? The one about how certain HOA presidents use their positions to harass families and steal property from their neighbors?" Jeff interviewed 3 families yesterday who were forced out of Maple Grove Estates by exactly the same tactics you tried to use on us. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, savoring both the caffeine and Karen's growing panic. Apparently, systematic harassment makes for very compelling journalism. Jeff will be here in about an hour to photograph the survey in progress and interview the professionals who discovered your years of illegal land use. He's particularly interested in the connection between your property theft and your abuse of HOA authority. Marcus smiled. He's also planning to interview Dale Morrison about his relationship with you and why he's been overlooking code violations on your property for years. The color drained from Karen's face. Dale doesn't I never asked him to. Dale's wife, Sandra, was very chatty with my wife yesterday. Apparently, Dale's been bragging at neighborhood barbecues about how he and his friend Karen keep the neighborhood in line. Sandra found it charming until Sarah explained that Dale had been ignoring serious safety violations on your property while targeting ours for harassment. Karen clutched her phone tighter. This is harassment. I'm filing a complaint with the county. The county's already involved, Davidson said, checking his tablet. We're required to report any significant boundary disputes to the assessor's office. They'll be sending an inspector to verify our findings and investigate how the original fence was installed in the wrong location. Additionally, Marcus added, the State HOA Oversight Board opened an investigation into your conduct yesterday. Turns out, using your position to target families for personal reasons violates about 6 different state regulations governing homeowner associations. Marcus watched her realize that every avenue of authority she'd relied on was either compromised or turned against her. For 12 years, she'd been the unquestioned ruler of Maple Grove Estates, wielding bylaws and regulations like a tyrant scepter. Now she was just a 62-year-old woman in a bathrobe, standing in someone else's garden, watching her carefully. Constructed kingdom crumble around her. You can't do this, she whispered. Actually, I can do all of this. Because unlike you, everything I'm doing is completely legal. Marcus gestured toward the survey crew, who were efficiently mapping every inch of his property with professional precision. I'm securing my property boundaries, which is my right as a landowner. I'm protecting my family from harassment, which is my right as a homeowner. And I'm making sure the truth comes out about your pattern of abuse, which is my right as a citizen. The sound of police sirens grew louder, approaching through the quiet subdivision. Karen straightened, some of her confidence returning. We'll see what the police have to say about your little stunt. Marcus nodded toward Davidson, who pulled out an official-looking folder. Tom, would you mind showing the officers our permits and documentation when they arrive? Of course, I have the court order for the survey, the property deeds, the boundary maps, and the municipal permits for the security fence installation. Davidson's smile was professionally bland. Everything's completely above board. 2 police cruisers pulled into Marcus's driveway, and 4 officers got out. Marcus recognized Sergeant Williams from the department's community liaison program. Met at several neighborhood meetings over the years. We got a call about property destruction. Before Marcus could answer, Karen rushed toward the officers. Sergeant Williams, thank God you're here. These men are destroying my garden with illegal construction equipment. I demand they be arrested immediately. Williams looked from Karen to the survey crew, to the orange flags marking the property line. Ma'am, can you show me the property deed that establishes this as your land? I don't need to show you anything. I've been maintaining this garden for 12 years. Everyone knows this is my property. Actually, Sergeant Davidson stepped forward with his folder. This is Mr. Chen's property. According to the legal survey recorded with the county, Ms. Whitmore has been using it without permission. Williams accepted the documents and spent several minutes reviewing them. Marcus watched Karen's face as the sergeant's expression grew increasingly grave. Ms. Whitmore, Williams said finally, according to these documents, you've... At 3:17 a.m. on Friday morning, Marcus was awakened by the piercing shriek of his new security system. Motion sensors had detected movement along the property line, and the automated lights blazed to life, flooding his backyard with halogen brilliance. Through his bedroom window, he could see a figure hunched over the newly installed fence, wielding what appeared to be a pair of heavy-duty wire cutters. Karen Whitmore was attempting to cut through his security fence. Marcus grabbed his phone and activated the security camera recording function. ensuring that every second of Karen's destruction was captured in high-definition video. Then he dialed 911. 911 Emergency Services. This is Marcus Chen at 1247 Maple Grove Drive. I have someone attempting to destroy my security fence and trespass on my property. The perpetrator is in the act of cutting through the fence right now. Are you in immediate danger, sir? Marcus watched through the window as Karen struggled with the wire cutters, her movements jerky with desperation and rage. The perpetrator appears to be an elderly woman, but she's actively destroying my property. I need officers here immediately. Units are on the way, sir. Please stay inside and do not confront the individual. Marcus had no intention of confronting Karen. The security cameras were doing all the confronting he needed. He watched her work her way along the fence line, cutting through wire mesh with methodical determination. She was wearing dark clothing and had covered her silver hair with a black beanie. But the motion-activated lights made her face clearly visible to the cameras. Sarah appeared beside him, wrapping a robe around her thin frame. Is that really Karen out there destroying our fence? That's really Karen out there destroying our fence while being recorded by 6 different security cameras. Marcus pulled up the live feed on his phone, showing Sarah the crystal-clear footage of their neighbor's criminal rampage. I don't think she realizes that vandalism is a felony when the damage exceeds $500. How much did that fence cost? $1,800. Marcus felt a cold satisfaction as he watched Karen move to another section of fencing. Plus the cost of the security system, plus the cost of the survey, plus attorney's fees for the property damage lawsuit I'm going to file. The sound of police sirens grew louder, approaching through the quiet neighborhood. Karen must have heard them too, because she dropped the wire cutters and began running toward her house. But the security lights followed her movement, keeping her illuminated like an actor on a stage. She didn't make it. 2 police cruisers surrounded her before she reached her gate, their spotlights turning night into day. Marcus watched from his window as Karen raised her hands, still clutching a piece of the fence she'd cut away. Mr. Chen. The 911 dispatcher was still on the line. Officers report they have the suspect in custody. Thank you, I'll be right down with the security footage. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in his backyard with Sergeant Williams, reviewing the damage to his fence. Karen had managed to cut through nearly 30 feet of wire mesh before the police arrived, leaving jagged metal edges and gaping holes in his security barrier. She really did a number on your fence, Williams said, photographing the damage with his phone. Wire cutters looks like premeditated destruction. Sergeant, I want to press full charges. This is the second time in 2 days she's trespassed on my property, and now she's escalated to vandalism. Marcus handed Williams a tablet displaying the security footage. Everything's recorded in high definition, including clear shots of her face. Williams watched the video, shaking his head. Mr. Chen, in 20 years of police work, I've never seen someone document their own crime so thoroughly. She's looking directly at the camera in several of these shots. She probably doesn't even realize the cameras are there. Karen's been so used to operating without consequences that I don't think it occurred to her that someone might actually document her behavior. Well, she's going to have plenty of time to think about it. Vandalism of this scope is a Class A misdemeanor, possibly a felony, depending on total damages, plus criminal trespass, plus destruction of property. Williams closed the tablet. Her attorney's going to have his work cut out for him. Marcus looked toward Karen's house, where lights blazed in every window. He could see shadows moving behind the curtains. Wife had just been arrested for cutting up the neighbor's fence in the middle of the night. There's something else you should know. Sergeant, the reporter from the Herald, is planning to run a story about this whole situation on Sunday. I suspect that by Monday morning, Karen's midnight fence-cutting expedition is going to be front page. News? Williams groaned. Mr. Chen, please tell me you're not planning to escalate this situation further. I'm not planning anything, Sergeant. I'm just responding to Karen's escalation. She targeted my family during a medical crisis. She tried to steal our property, and now she's committing crimes on my land. Marcus gestured toward the damaged fence. At this point, I'm just documenting everything and letting the legal system handle it. What about the HOA situation? Is she still trying to force you to modify your pool? Marcus smiled grimly. Actually, that problem resolved itself yesterday afternoon. After the story about the survey and the property theft started circulating, Through the neighborhood, I received a call from the HOA board. Apparently, they held an emergency meeting and voted to remove Karen as president, pending the outcome of the state investigation. Who's the new president? Jennifer Martinez from Pine Street. She's an attorney who specializes in property law. Her first official act was to rescind all of Karen's recent compliance orders and establish new protocols for HOA enforcement. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed Williams an email. According to this message, my pool is grandfathered and requires no modifications whatsoever. Williams read the email, his expression shifting from concern to something approaching amusement. So Karen destroyed your fence for nothing. Karen destroyed my fence because she's having a complete psychological breakdown. She built her entire identity around controlling this neighborhood, and when that control was challenged, she couldn't cope with the reality that she wasn't actually in charge of anything. A new police cruiser pulled into the driveway, and Officer Martinez got out. She walked over to Williams with a folder in her hand. Sergeant, we finished processing the suspect. She's being held pending bail hearing, but there's something you need to see. Martinez opened the folder and pulled out several photographs. We found these in her possession when we arrested her. The photographs showed Marcus's house from multiple angles, including shots of his pool, his backyard, and his family. Some of the images appeared to have been taken with a telephoto lens from inside Karen's house. Others were clearly taken from his property, including close-ups of his security system and detailed shots of his pool equipment. She's been conducting surveillance, Williams said, studying the photos. Some of these had to be taken from inside your yard, probably at night. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the early morning air. She's been stalking us. It looks that way. We also found a notebook with detailed logs of your family's activities when you leave for work, when your kids go to school, when your wife goes to medical appointments. Martinez pulled out a small spiral notebook filled with Karen's handwriting. She's been watching your house for months, documenting your schedules and routines. Sarah appeared in the backyard, wearing her robe and slippers. Marcus, what's taking so long? She stopped when she saw the photographs in Williams's hands. What are those? Williams looked at Marcus, silently asking permission. Marcus nodded. Mrs. Chen, it appears your neighbor has been conducting surveillance of your family. We found these photographs and logs in her possession when we arrested her for vandalism. Sarah stared at the images, her face going pale. She's been watching, U.S. According to these logs, she's been documenting your medical appointments, your children's school schedules, even your grocery shopping trips. Martinez's voice was carefully professional, but Marcus could hear the disgust underneath. This goes far beyond a property dispute, Mrs. Chen. This is stalking behavior. Marcus put his arm around Sarah's shoulders, feeling her tremble. How long has she been doing this? Based on the dates in the notebook, at least 6 months, possibly. Longer? Williams closed the folder. Mr. Chen, we're going to need to file additional charges: criminal stalking, invasion of privacy, possibly harassment. This is much more serious than simple vandalism. Sarah looked up at Marcus, her eyes wide with fear and anger. She's been watching our kids. The logs include detailed information about Emma and Jake, their school schedules, their after-school activities, even their friends' names and addresses. Martinez's jaw was tight with controlled fury. This woman is seriously disturbed. Marcus felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. Threatening him was one thing. Threatening Sarah during her cancer treatment was worse. But stalking his children crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. I want every possible charge filed, he said quietly, and I want a restraining order that keeps her away from my family permanently. We'll get started on the paperwork immediately. Williams, I